All right, good afternoon, folks. Just wanted to come at you guys with a quick video because I was watching a video from Sister Deetra K on Emancipation Media that where she was discussing about life insurance, and so I wanted to give at my little 2 cents. So I'm not all glammed up or anything. This is me without any makeup on or anything like that. So let me just play this video for you guys. And I don't think I'm going to play the whole entire thing because I think it's about 7 minutes. But I do want to play a portion of it.
This sister is going to take Black Americans to task for this. Check it out.
Black people have been too comfortable for generations and generations of leaving this world and leaving their lineage and kids and grandkids behind with nothing. Who made that the norm to leave your kids with zero? Not a house, not a car, not an asset, not nothing. It's not, life insurance policies are not that expensive.
So she basically said that Black people have gotten too comfortable with leaving this world without leaving their children and grandchildren something, right? And she also brought life insurance into the conversation. Well, I want to dispel a myth. Right off the top, I want to say that it is absolutely false that Black people do not believe in life insurance. In fact, Black Americans are the most insured group of people in the United States of America. Yes, you heard me right. Now, the average rate of insured people in America is 52%, but Black Americans are insured to the tune of 56%. Now, there's a big however. The first, however, is we are underinsured. Now, what that means is while we have more policies than anybody else, those policies do not do what they should or could be doing. So, for example, we might have an insurance policy that's $5,000, right? Life insurance. Well, for a funeral, on average, it costs about 12 to 15, 20,000, and depending on who you are, like when Aretha Franklin had all those outfit changes.
Now, I do want to stop her right there for a quick second. Yeah, that's probably about right. About 10 to 15,000 for an average funeral. If you're going to really get a upgraded coffin, and then also for your plot, if you don't already own it, and then just the ceremony itself, yeah, you're looking at about that. However, if you do a cremation would only cost you a couple of $1,000, and you could do the ceremony at a local park or something like that. Or if you are a member of a religious institution like a church or something like that, then there will probably not be any charges for you. But, each religious institution is a little bit different from my understanding. So while it can only cost you a couple of $1,000, if you go with the cremation route, but it can get up there, especially if you want to be buried. So just keep that in mind.
Could be pretty expensive. Well, $5,000 ain't gonna cover it. Now let's go back a little bit. That kind of came out of racism. Back in the day, when insurance agents would go to our homes, and a lot of those insurance agents were white, they would say, well, I'm going to sell them an insurance policy, but I don't want to sell them something that's going to leave them wealthy. When they die, we don't want to leave them generational wealth, so we'll sell them just enough. Now, when thinking, you think, well, isn't that hurting the insurance agent too? Yeah, but that's how racism works sometimes.
Now, I just want to say, in terms of that, yeah, that was a part of it, but also more than anything, in my opinion, and I was also too a life insurance agent. I was licensed in multiple states as well. But in my opinion, based upon when I was an agent and the research that I did at that time, the bigger issue was that the type of policies, not just in terms of dollar value policies, but also just the type of policy period that they would traditionally offer to our folks, FBAs, Black Americans, was the type of policies where it decreased in value over time, even if they paid their premiums on time every month. So, because I had a lady that had reached out to me when I was selling insurance, and her and her husband had bought policies when they were young, in their 20s or whatever. And by the time this lady reached out to me, she was in her late 70s, I believe, or something like that. She was close to 80, if not 80, or something like that. And they had went through all of their savings and had, mortgaged their house to the hill when her husband got sick to try to prolong his life. And he ended up passing away, of course. And then now when she reached out to me, she was trying to get things in order for when she passed, to make it easier on her children and grandchildren, to deal with, her funeral and all that, because I kind of recall that she told me that it was really a mess when it came time to bury her husband. So, and that's when she found out she actually found out about how jacked up the policy was that they were sold when her husband passed away. She found out that it was a decreasing value type of policy. And she explained to me that she didn't understand that. She didn't know that that was the case. And she found out when her husband passed away that it wasn't so much of the insurance agent being a racist necessarily. It was the fact that during that time in the US, even if they had wanted to sell them a better policy, they couldn't. So those very very horrible policies, I'm trying to think of a better word, but outside of those horrible policies that they sold to Black people, there really wasn't any other type of policy they could have sold them. And so they sold them what they could sell them, which was just straight trash. It was just straight garbage. And it was just real unfortunate that I couldn't help her because of her age. She was already past the age cutoff, and I can't remember because it's been such a long time since I sold life insurance. I had my license back in 2016, 2017, and I think maybe even 2018. And so it's been quite a while. So I've forgotten a lot of the nuances, but I do remember her telling me that the way the laws were then, when her and her husband bought those policies, those were the only type of policies that they could sell to Black people, and they were horrible policies. They were paying pretty good premiums every month, and the policy value, and they had bought a good amount of insurance from what I can recall, but because the policies decreased in value, and they figured, the insurance agents industry, their actuarials had figured that they would be dead by the time they actually would need the policy. So and they would have still had some value left on it. And because at that time, because if she was, let's just say she was 80, and this was at least 8 years ago, or let's say 10 years ago. Let's say this was 10 years ago and she was 80. So that means that if this is 2025, 10 years ago was 2015. And she was 80, let's say, for instance. So that puts her at what? At how old? At being born in what year? So in 2015, she was 80. So she was born somewhere around 1935, something like that. And so at that time, they couldn't sell them anything better than what she got, basically, from my understanding. So, that's how the racism, in my opinion, was more perverse, because it was baked into the cake. It was baked into the system. All right, let's continue with what the sister is talking about.
Times. And oftentimes, even if it hurts me, I'm gonna make sure them black people don't get nothing, right? So, but with that, if you get a life insurance policy that is, does more than just pay for the funeral, then yeah, you can leave behind some wealth, building generational wealth or a legacy, so where your children could buy a house or pay for this or that or the other college education, as though you were still here, right? Because that's what life insurance does. It protects against death. That's what it does. Okay, so that's racism, and the policies being under funded, if you will. Now, the other thing is, oftentimes we don't have a big trust in not just the policy, but the companies and the insurance agents, because a lot of times, yeah, that comes out of racism. And sometimes, now listen, I used to sell life insurance, I don't sell it anymore. But life insurance agents were likened to used car salesmen. Now, y'all know the reputation of a used car salesman, right? They'll say, yeah, it runs great. Man, it kicked the tire, see? And then the minute you drive it off the lot, it starts to clunker and putter and all kind of stuff. And they're like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. You bought a lemon and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So if they like your life insurance agents to use car salesmen, that's not a good thing. Now, it is that way because unfortunately, life insurance agents, sometimes they do some strange things to, sell the policy. So with that, yeah, there's some mistrust. Now, the other thing is, yeah, we've kind of gotten away from the ideology of leaving generational wealth. Now, I'll give you guys a perfect example. Both of my grandmothers were domestics, which meant that they took care of white people in their families, right? They weren't making a whole lot of money, but do you know that they were able to leave something for their children and their grandchildren? And my grandfather as well. He had his own little business and he was able to leave something behind. He didn't just leave the planet and say, well, sorry for you suckers. They were able to leave something because they were in that mind frame of, oh, okay, I've worked all my life, and they had property and all kind of stuff, and I'm going to leave something for the next generations. The problem with that is we didn't continue to teach that. We often hear about how we get grandma and grandpa's houses or mom and daddy's houses, and we lose them because we weren't taught about property taxes and all of that. Or sometimes it's like, well, we're going to sell the house because I want the money, right? So we get the money and we go off on trips and we buy things that depreciate in value, but then we don't have the house. And then somebody else moves into that house. Normally that doesn't look like us. And then that leads to gentrification and things like that. And so we have to get back into the mind frame of teaching our heirs and things like that, how to keep the property, why it's important to keep the property, and about the importance of life insurance and having enough of it to not only just pay for the burial, but to leave generational wealth. And lastly, I want to say this: we've all heard that GoFundMe's are not life insurance policies, and they're
Okay, I'm going to leave it right there and add my additional 2 cents. So I totally agree with everything that she said. There was a few things that was very frustrating for me when I was an agent, and what led to me giving up my license and deciding not to continue down that path as a career is, one, because I really wanted to be able to help our community, my community. However, our folks are not the easiest to try to deal with, do business with. We can be extremely frustrating to try to explain things to and to do business with. because a lot of times we're so set in our ways, and a lot of us are so jaded, and we have a high level of distrust. Um, and it seems like, especially sometimes when it's one of our own trying to, share information with us. But if a Caucasian came along and said the same exact things, we're more likely to believe it. Strangely enough, as that sounds. Another thing is that, yes, she's correct 100%. We're not teaching about financial literacy in a lot of other communities and cultures. It's no secret to talk about finances and money and stuff like that. In a lot of Black families, it's a big taboo. We don't talk about our finances or anything like that. If we do, it's from a negative standpoint. We speak poverty and brokenness, into existence by a lot of the things that we say, and also by a lot of the things that we do. We tend to want to look rich or look wealthy on the outside, but with appearances, but our bank accounts reflect and tell a very, very different story. And so a lot of times the mindset is, I don't need to get life insurance because that's just another bill. I heard that many times when I was out there as an agent. The biggest thing that I heard that was very, very disappointing and discouraging was, and this mainly was men that would say things like this, not so much the wives. And it was that the man had this attitude a lot of times, or the husband had this attitude a lot of times, that he wasn't going to get a big policy or a policy at all because he wasn't going to be letting his wife, live it up large with the next man, on because of his death. And, my thinking was like, you're dead, so why do you care? And that's awfully selfish of you to not want your wife to move on, of course, have her time of grieving or whatever. And that, whatever that time amount is going to be different for each person. It's not, I don't think it's right or anybody's place to say how long somebody should or shouldn't grieve the loss of a loved one, whether it's a spouse, a child, or parent, or whatever. Some people are able to move forward in life after it's only been a year or 6 months or whatever the case may be. But I don't think it's right or fair to judge that person. And so why would you want for this person that you claim that you love and that you've built a life with, and you're building a life with, why would you not want them to be able to move on with their life and continue living their life? That to me is just the craziest thing ever that that I heard from people, mainly men, like I said, even people that have parents, that have kids, and even my own father made this comment of, well, I didn't get left with anything, so y'all gonna have to get it on your own or whatever. He said that at one point in time. And that was the attitude as well that I heard on various occasions when I was an insurance agent, is that, we got this attitude and this mentality, and then we wonder why we never get ahead, why we are always in last place when it comes to, in terms of generational wealth. Yes, there is a lot of racism and all of that. Yes, there are a lot of obstacles that has been put in front of us. No, we didn't get any, or as of yet anyways, we haven't gotten any type of reparations when our ancestors were, freed from slavery. They weren't given anything. They had to get it out the mud, which you would think that because they had to get it out the mud, that some almost 200 years later, or about 200 years later, that we would, over 200 years later, that we would want to not have to have our heirs have to start from zero. But that seems to be, and not every one of us, of course, doesn't have this attitude, but enough of us have this attitude that we're working and living for today, and that's it, and let tomorrow take care of itself, and our kids are just going to have to figure it out. You know, I just don't understand it. It's hard for me to even grasp it, because my attitude ever since I became a parent at 21, almost 22, my whole motivation and reason for living and breathing and doing jobs that I didn't like and putting up with people that I wanted to cuss out or bitch slap was because of my kids. You know, they were my whole motivating factor of getting up and getting out there and getting it the best I could, because I wanted them to have a better life than what I had growing up. I wanted them to be able to have experiences that I didn't get a chance to have, you know, as a kid growing up. I never wanted them to know what hunger felt like. I never wanted them to know what it felt like to live in an unsafe environment. And so I did everything that I could to ensure that that never was the case. And, you know, knock on wood, which I don't really have any wood around me, because even this desk is particle wood, that they never experienced any of those things. And I thought I was doing the right things so that they wouldn't have to worry about student loans or anything like that by going into real estate. Unfortunately, when I did have a bunch of real estate properties, I didn't buy them right. And so when the Great Recession happened, I ended up losing all of them. But that was my plan with buying those properties, was so that I would be able to pay for my daughter's college educations when the time had came. And also when, you know, they got married and stuff like that, which they're still not married. They're 27 and 30, going almost 31. And they're still not married, anything like that. But my plan was to be in a position to where when the time came that I would be able to help them, you know, get their first house, pay for their wedding and stuff like that. So, you know, I definitely tried to do the things to put them in a better position. My heart was definitely in the right place, and I put all my efforts and time into that. Things didn't quite work out exactly like that. I did help my youngest daughter with college and all of that, as well as her dad did as well. And my oldest one, I was helping her as well. And then she dropped out, but now she's back in and she'll be graduating soon, at least with her AA at this point. But I did try to at least do all the things that I could to put them in a better position. And I'm still doing things so that if they ever do grace me with grandkids, they get married and they have kids and I have grandkids or whatever, I'll be leaving some things to them, to my kids and hopefully future grandkids, in terms of real estate and things like that. And also, you know, I've had life insurance since my oldest daughter was born. And so I've always kept life insurance, and, you know, so they'll get a nice little chunk there as well with my life insurance policies that I have. So, I have tried to do the things, but you would be amazed and astonished at how many of us have this mentality that we're not going to leave anything to our kids and they'll just have to figure it out. And it's really sad. And then some people's attitude is they think that if they get life insurance, that or if maybe they get it but they don't tell anybody about it because they think that their kids or whatever is going to try to kill them for the life insurance, which if a person does do that, and people have done that, and then if they get caught, which most of the people end up getting caught, not only do you lose your freedom, but you also don't get the money. Because if you intentionally cause someone's death by murdering them, the life insurance company is not going to give you the money. So just so you know, so if anybody watches this video and you think that that's a good idea, I'm here to tell you it's not. Okay. You're 9 times out of 10, you're going to get caught and you're going to go to prison probably for the rest of your life or a good portion of your life. And on top of that, it's going to be all for nothing because you're not even going to get the freaking money. So just so you know. But yeah, we definitely need to be willing and open to talk about money, talk about finances, and don't listen to people like, Dave Ramsey. He says a lot of great things. So I'm not anti Dave Ramsey. And Susie Orman is a whole nother story. But the whole buy term and invest the difference doesn't work for us for the most part, because what ends up happening is that people will buy a decent sized term policy that would maybe for $500,000. So it would leave, say if they got 2 kids, it would leave each kid with, $250,000, which, that's nothing to sneeze at, right? That's a good start. The problem is that a lot of times, if we do keep the policy for the entire, let's say 30 years or something like that, we outlive it, which that's what has happened with my dad. He outlived the term policy that him and my mom had got on him. And so when I was still an agent, I got a smaller whole life policy on him. That's, more than enough to have him cremated or whatever. And with a little bit left over that if my mom is still alive, I'll use, on her. But, they got the term because that was the cheapest and he outlived it. And so now when it expired in his late 60s, late 60s, his health, not that he's in horrible health, but it wasn't obviously as good as it was when he got the term in his late 30s or whatever it was, right? Of course. So it was going to be way, way more expensive to get another term of any significant amount. And so, we had to end up getting him a smaller term that, is not a ton of money. It's not like it would, last the different after we, paid to bury him or cremate him or whatever. It's not like it's going to be enough for my mom to sell up into the sunset or anything like that. But is basically what I could afford. So, it is what it is, right? And so that's the other problem with that whole idea or philosophy of buy term and invest the difference. And your assets should be more than enough to pay for your funeral expenses when the time comes. We end up outliving the term policy and we don't invest the difference. Because stuff happens, life keeps lifing, right? So things keep coming up and you'll always find an excuse to not invest the money. Not only that, the other issue with term is that let's say you just get, just enough or whatever that would cover your funeral expenses. And maybe if you're buying your house, maybe it's enough to pay off the house, or maybe pay the house down a little bit or something like that. And let's say you expire way early, and you haven't had enough time in the market to invest any significant amount. That's the other downside about that whole ideology of buy term and invest the difference. So I just feel like if you can afford a whole life policy or a term policy with the ability to convert it to whole life, that would be better, and definitely one that has living benefits. When I say living benefits, what I mean is that a policy that has the ability that would allow you, if you got diagnosed with cancer or something like that, and they, gave you maybe 18 months to live or something like that, but you've heard about some holistic treatments in another country that you want to try, you would be able to take some of your death benefit. If you have the living benefits attached to it, you take some of the death benefit and you don't have to pay it back, and you can go get that treatment that you want to go get. Or let's say they say it's terminal, or you've gotten a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, a fifth opinion, an umpteenth opinion, and everybody tells you the same thing. Okay, well, now maybe you want to spend whatever amount of time you got left, instead of, in a hospice or whatever, maybe you want to spend those last few months or whatever, taking a trip that you always wanted to take with your family or something like that. Well, you'd be able to take some of that money from your death benefit so that you can go do that with your family. Because it's the memories that really is what counts, right? It's the memories that's the most important, outside of obviously, leaving a legacy and generational wealth. So that's what I would recommend, is to get whole life. If you can't afford whole life, at least get term of at least a 30-year term with a convertible option to convert it to whole life. And you don't have to go through an examination again or anything like that. And also one that has the living benefits with it, so that if you get terminally ill, or you lose a hand or a finger or a foot or an eye or something like that, you can also take money off of your death benefit that you don't have to pay back to help you. Let's say you need to get your house altered, because now you're disabled and you need disability features added to your house, like a ramp, grab bars in the bathroom, in the shower, and different things like that. Or you have a 2-story house and you need to have a lift put in or something like that. Those things can be kind of costly. But if you have a policy with living benefits, these are some of the things that they would allow you to withdraw some of your death benefit money to get those alterations done to your house or something like that. So, just my 2 cents. But yeah, trying to sell life insurance to our people, boy, it was tough. It was really tough. Outside of the fact that the brokers, you have to work under a broker for a number of years until you have so much of experience and stuff like that. And there's a lot of unscrupulous, dishonest brokers out there. And that was another reason why, that was probably the bigger reason why I got out of the business, because the brokers that I worked with outside of one were liars and cheaters and crooks and criminals and thieves. So, but anyways, that's my 2 cents, you guys. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like, comment, share. If you've had a bad experience or a good experience with life insurance or a life insurance agent, I'd love to hear about it. Put it in the comments. Stay tuned on the channel. This channel is all about multiple streams of income, whether it's online or offline. That's what my husband and I are doing. We have several offline businesses, as well as I'm working on my online stuff. So check out my online store here on YouTube, or my TikTok shop on my TikTok channel, which is the same name, West Coast Media Solutions. I think it's West Coast Media Solutions Inc., if I'm not mistaken. So, follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, and of course, subscribe to the channel here, because you guys want to keep up with what we're doing with the Kenya project. In case you are new, we did buy some land in Kenya last year, a little over a year ago, 2 acres, and we're going to be building a homestead as well as a 6 A-frame cottages that will be renting out as Airbnb, and we're going to have lots of great amenities like swimming pool, hammocks, fire pits, outdoor movie screen, a fitness room. It's going to be really, really nice. It's in a kind of a rural part of Nairobi, and we've actually had our road put in. The road is named after us, but we've got to get the road all weather wise, and we're still trying to get all the plans from this Kenyan architect before we can actually get the quotes from the contractors that my dad and I met up with back in November, when we went to Kenya in November to check on the progress of the 8-foot stone retaining wall that we had put around the entire 2 acres. So that's done. The gates are up. And then the next step is getting all the plans and specs, so then we can get the quotes from the contractors and then start fundraising for the money, because so far everything's been on us. And it's going to take us a lot longer to realize this dream if everything is on us. So we're going to be looking for you guys' help, and we'll be offering some nice perks for those that contribute. Probably going to do some type of Indiegogo, or I think that's how you say it, or GoFundMe campaign or something like that. And maybe even hopefully be able to get some financing as well here in the States. But anyway, so that's that. Until next time, I didn't plan on this video being this long, but it so happened to be this long. So, hey, it is what it is. But until next time, guys, take care, and be sure to take care of each other, and see you on the next one.